Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4, here to talk about some World Warships Legends. Today we'll be talking about a premium ship, the Tier 5 US Navy battleship, USS California. As usual, we're going to start with some history, go on to analysis, talk about the commander options, look at the stats, and finally finish up with some gameplay. Like always, there should be a list of time codes down in the description if you do want to skip around. The Tennessee class of ships would mark the end of an era for the United States Navy. After the construction of the Pennsylvania class, which included the Pennsylvania and Arizona, and then the New Mexico class, which consists of the New Mexico, Mississippi, and Idaho, the Tennessee class of ships would be the very last class of standard battleships built for the United States Navy with 14-inch guns. By the time that she was constructed, most of the major navies of the world were already constructing ships with 15-inch guns. That said, most of the battleships and battlecruisers of the time mounted these in 4 twin turrets, as opposed to 4 triple turrets, which you would find on the American super dreadnoughts. So she was still thought to be competitive with ships of her time. The California would be the second of 2 Tennessee-class battleships built for the United States Navy. Laid down in October 1916, launched in November 1919, she was commissioned into service in August of 1921. Though too late to serve in the First World War, the Tennessee class was an incremental improvement over the New Mexicos which came before it. Still, the California was a special ship in the sense that she was the first battleship in more than 15 years built on the West Coast and the only super dreadnought built there. After her completion, she became the flagship of the Pacific Fleet, and she would win several competitions for gunnery and operational excellence during the interwar period. The California had some unfortunate luck going into World War II. On December 7, 1941, California was anchored at Pearl Harbor, moored to the southeast, ahead of all the other ships in the line. All by herself, she was a prime target. To make matters worse, many of her watertight interior hatches were open for inspection that was supposed to happen later that day. Though her commanding officer quickly ordered her to action stations upon notification of the impending attack by Japanese air wings, the California was not able to get underway before she was struck twice by torpedoes. The ship began taking on a lot of water rather quickly because of the many open hatches. The crew also had to counterflood the starboard side of the ship to try to keep her as level as possible. And as water entered the fuel system, that cut power throughout the ship, making damage control efforts that much more difficult. Though incapacitated, with 98 of her crew killed, the California fought on, and 4 of her crew would go on to earn the Medal of Honor that day, with 3 of those posthumously awarded. After a several-day battle with the waters flooding into the ship, California came to rest at the bottom of the shallow harbor at Pearl. Over the course of the next 4 months, she was given repairs and refloated. A few months after that, she departed for Puget Sound in Washington State, where she would be totally repaired and rebuilt, basically into a new ship. Essentially, her superstructure was rebuilt, with both the torpedo protection and anti-air protection being completely redesigned by a person who is either scared to death of aircraft, scared to death of torpedoes, potentially both, but almost certainly paranoid. When the work on the California was complete, she'd pick up an additional 11 feet of torpedo protection on each side of the ship, making her too wide to travel through the Panama Canal, as well as more than 100 anti-aircraft guns. All in all, this modernization would take around 15 months. In September 1944, California would sail back into the action, marking yet another big middle finger to the Japanese government, as yet another ship they thought they'd sunk returned to take the fight to the Empire. First, she entered the battle at Saipan, providing shore bombardment. Then more of that in Guam and retaking the Philippines, and the Battle of Leyte Gulf, though on this occasion the Japanese sortied Fuso and her sister ship, Yamashiro, against the American fleet, along with several escort vessels. California and her sister ship, Tennessee, were 2 of the 6 American battleships present in position to engage the advancing Japanese forces. What would follow would be the last of the great battleship duels in World War II, and would spell the end for both Fuso-class battleships. Though she wouldn't take any significant damage as part of that operation, she was struck by kamikaze during the Battle of Lingayen Gulf, which temporarily forced her back to Pearl Harbor for repairs. She would return to operation soon enough, assisting in Okinawa, and then the occupation of Japan following the unconditional surrender of Imperial Japan. Following this, California would travel the long way around the world to the east coast of the United States, where she'd be decommissioned in 1947, and she would stay there until sold for scrap in March 1959. In total, California would earn 7 battle stars throughout her service. In terms of how the California plays in World of Warships Legends, I don't think it will come as any surprise that the ship feels pretty familiar. Extremely tough and painfully slow, the California shares most of the major features that you will come to associate with other American standard class battleships. Where she does differ a little bit is that you can earn her for free through the Bureau, which is to say, particularly if you don't want to spend any money on her, then she's inarguably the best deal out there. While you might have to drop as much as $40 on an Arizona, the California's abilities aren't exactly far behind. While I do think the Arizona is more accurate, and at least in terms of her secondaries, a more capable ship, if secondaries were actually worth much right now, and while I have talked with several people who think that the California's dispersion is just awful, I can't say that it's really all that bad. At least it isn't noticeably more unreliable than the New Mexico. Where the California is kind of a harder ship to play comes down to her size. More than 20% wider than the Arizona, dodging torpedoes in an American-style battleship has always been something of a cumbersome, Matrix-style slow-motion affair. With the California, Neo's just been replaced by a modern-day Steven Seagal. This isn't really a stat-based comparison, as much as it is just an observation that the California is a relatively hard target to miss. The other unfortunate thing about reviewing the California right now is that I can tell you that the California is going to be absurdly powerful as an AA platform. At least it should be, relatively speaking. But I have no idea what that means, since we don't have aircraft carriers or even an AA stat. And if I do happen to be wrong on this, I don't feel like I'm the one who's really dropped the ball here. In my leisurely perusal of the ship's beautiful model, I counted no less than 37 dual Oerlikon cannons and 12 quad 40mm Bofors guns, and the 8 twin 5-inch dual-purpose guns on the side also should count towards her AA suite. And I have to imagine that this should translate into some truly horrifying potential where aircraft carriers are concerned. But that said, even without aircraft carriers, the California is a capable, if oversized, ship, and I highly encourage you to earn her in the Bureau. As far as your commanders are concerned at this point, the rumor on the street is that the California can't really lay down the law at range. Now, I'm not really sure if that's true overall, but if you do want to fight against that, you'll probably pick Sims to help increase your accuracy. You can also increase your damage. Like most accuracy commanders, this comes with an increase in your vulnerability to fire, but also, on the other side of it, you can probably avoid more situations where you're seriously in threat of being torpedoed, provided you can more or less keep track of where those enemy destroyers are. But like every accuracy commander, every improvement to your gunnery performance comes with a corresponding penalty to your maneuverability. And since you can hardly move in the first place, it tends to be all that much more noticeable on American standard class battleships. The other dedicated American battleship commander isn't going to do wonders for your speed or maneuverability either, but at least he isn't going to hurt it. Willis Lee instead offers improved survivability across the board, mostly by reducing the number of fires you can set on this mobile landmass by 25%, and giving you access to an additional, more powerful heal. You can also throw on Brawler if you really want to increase the number of hits you're going to score, provided that you don't mind having even shorter range. And really, that's pretty much the best option you have when you're using Lee. Not that you'll hit more of your shots, percentage-wise. You'll simply have more shots. And as they say, quantity has a quality all of its own. Last but not least is George Dewey. And Dewey can relieve you of having to make too many hard decisions. While I'm more keen on basic commanders than most, there's not a lot of benefit to this sort of build, so I would probably avoid it. But if you're looking at it, you can get a 4th heal with fully packed, and pick up at least a little bit of extra speed, less than a knot, maybe a few hundred meters on your range too. Everything else here is pretty underwhelming. For stats, we'll run down the California's base statistics versus other Tier 5 battleships, but most of all we'll be comparing it versus the Arizona and New Mexico. All of the American battleships have relatively good survivability characteristics, and the California is no different. She actually slides in just behind the Mutsu as the Tier 5 battleship with the most hit points, at the tier with 58,300. This puts her 1,100 above the Arizona and 5,100 more than New Mexico. Her armor, near as I can tell, is also pretty good, ranging from 16 to 457 millimeters, which is joint highest on both sides of the armor scale. Torpedo protection is 40%, which is also very good at her tier. Again, joint highest with the New Mexico. So really, when looking at survivability, the only way to consider any of this a little disappointing is that the California would have had initially a better torpedo protection than the New Mexico, but with its refit configuration would realistically have been even higher. I'm definitely not saying this is needed for balance purposes. I'm just saying the California actually really should be better than New Mexico here. All of the Tier 5 American battleships have 4 turrets with 3 14-inch guns. The California has very similar range versus the Arizona or New Mexico. In fact, being exactly 200 meters more than Arizona and 200 meters less than New Mexico. She does walk away with the fastest reloads with just 30 seconds. This is good news for the California, since the remainder of these statistics are exactly the same as what you're going to find on New Mexico. The only thing we don't really know is the dispersion on its main battery, and frankly, it doesn't seem all that much worse than New Mexico, as far as I can tell. When we move into maneuverability, the California comes in at just 20.5 knots. That makes it a half a knot slower than the other Tier 5 American battleships. Previously, the Arizona and New Mexico were actually joint slowest at the tier, but considering how thick this ship is, she's lucky that she isn't at least another half knot slower. In any case, she does have the worst rudder shift of any American battleship at this tier, and though that is only by 0.1 second over the Arizona, it's only 0.1 better than the worst rudder shift at the tier, which belongs to the Normandy. The New Mexico actually beats this out by more than a second, but in any case, all 3 ships have a relatively tight 640-meter turning circle. Jumping into concealment, the California is the second most stealthy battleship at the tier, behind Prince Eitel Friedrich. She does inch out the other American battleships by 100 to 200 meters, but this is largely a competition of incredibly visible ships versus one another. For what it's worth, these numbers for air detectability and firing while in smoke are 100 meters better than her fellow American battleships. In the consumable department, the California comes with a repair party and a plane slot. The repair party is your typical repair party, repairing 0.5% of your HP each second over the course of 28 seconds. You have exactly the same options for a plane as Arizona and New Mexico. That means either a fighter that lasts a minute and a half, or a spotter which lasts just 30 seconds. I imagine the fighter will be more valuable once there are carriers, but right now it's a fairly even trade, with the spotter offering you improved accuracy for 1 shot at range, or up to 2 shots if you decide to use Brawler. That said, if you do use Brawler, the additional spotting that you get from a fighter may offer you more advantages in terms of detecting incoming torpedoes. So, it's an interesting trade, and we're just going to mark this one down to personal preference. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and jump into some gameplay. We're going to be on Neighbors. I will go ahead and get my commander up on the screen right quick. As you can see, even though I don't usually do this, you can see that I'm playing an accuracy build. I like to experiment. In any case, I do want to say some nice things about this model as we start to roll out. Obviously, you can see the first thing you notice whenever you start playing the California is just what a huge ship it is. I also really like that you can kind of see the old outline of the ship, both in the deck on the rear part of the ship, and also that forward section that's just above the ledge. That pretty much represents the original beam of the ship, which is really neat. Not really related to the actual game. And we should probably talk about that because we start out the game with just a beautiful shot that manages to do some terrible things to, of all ships, the Fuso. So we managed to shave off just a little bit north of 34,000 hit points, which, when you're me, means that you're probably not going to hit another shot for the entire game. He doesn't seem to mind too much, so we'll put another set of shells out there. But as they're in the air, he does start to turn out. We just come away with 11,000 this time, so not too terrible. And as you can see, with the full accuracy build, we are keeping our shells relatively under control. Now, unfortunately, on neighbors, I usually get the middle spawn, which makes me a little bit sad because it's the last place in the world I want to be. Particularly with the slow battleship, you can see we have been moderating our speed a little bit here and there. Land a really nice hit on that Pensacola. So he's also in a bad way, and we're up to 73,000 damage. But back to the maneuvering, it's hard to get out of this position, particularly when you're this slow. And the other thing about being this slow is I can't go that far in any one direction other than into the middle and be able to count on contributing if my team gets in trouble. We might have booped that guy just a little bit. And we see that we've got one of these French destroyers coming up behind me. I wonder what he wants to do. I have already started to turn out. I'm going to sacrifice the front two guns just because I want to survive this rather than doing just a little bit of extra damage. I have a second thought. But at this point, we're going to slam on the brakes and turn as hard as we possibly can to port. And you see, even though this is a cumbersome ship, you can, with some good situational awareness, still make that dodge. Now we do manage to survive without actually even taking the torpedo hit. We activate our first heal, and we're still sort of thinking that we're going to move off to the north and then to the east. But increasingly it looks like the south and the west isn't going our way. Every second I move away from the cap is another second it's going to take me to get back. With the California, particularly since I'm sporting a top speed probably in the high 19 knot area, I can't really move away from this base unless I plan on never returning. So, assuming the southern flank is going to fall apart, I'm going to start sailing back towards our base. Not because I need to be on top of it in order to save it, but because I'm going to want a little bit of room to be able to maneuver away. Unfortunately, things aren't going all that well in the north now either, so the team is kind of a little bit collapsing. We got some targets. That Fuso has sailed a long way away from us. Let's see if he wants to be brave enough to come back. Now we're down to just 3 ships on my team. Really not very good at all. Now, though my teammates didn't finish off very many ships in the south, you can see they did shave off a pretty considerable amount of hit points from some of these. So, I'm not going to get too worried, not too upset. I feel like my positioning is pretty okay. I'm going to start to make a turn here because I want to kind of get into at least a 45-degree angle by the time that they start shooting at me. I've got about 8 seconds of flight time that it's going to take their shells to get to me. And I'm trying to predict when I'm going to get spotted. It might not have been a perfect guess, but we do all right. I think in this case I was getting a little excited about seeing the Fuso again, but I do need to take care of this Pensacola because I'm feeling pretty confident in my ability to damage Pensacolas. We get a little bit of squirrely dispersion there. And now we're looking back at the other two cruisers. These are a lot of shots to have to be taking. Obviously, with the 30-second reload, those guys are going to get several volleys by the time I'm able to respond. I need to take out as many guns as possible, so we actually look back at the Pensacola for a bit so as not to clue the Nuremberg in. Then we spend 2 turrets on shooting the Nuremberg, and then the last 2 turrets take out the Königsberg, and we actually managed to score a double strike on that. This makes my life a lot better because I'm just being shot to pieces by the Pensacola and the Fuso behind me. Once again, get let down a little bit by our grouping there, but one of the shells manages to find a citadel, so that just makes it just fine. And then with our staggered fire again, we do land another hit in the Pensacola, finish him off. Fantastic. Now we're going to turn a little bit so that we can get all of our guns engaged. You can see I can shoot over my shoulder and keep all of my guns in the fight and keep a bounce angle. This is a pretty decent angle to be fighting in the California. You've got a really thick main belt, so hopefully you bounce a lot of the shots off of your side. Your bow and stern are very squishy, so actually encouraging people not to shoot at those is probably pretty good. At this range, he probably can't help but actually hit me there, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. We are using our last heal, hoping to hold on to what remains of our life. And of course we have our Fuso friend who's been following us around for some of the game, running away from us at other parts. At this point I'm trying to think what I want to do. Shooting at the Pensacola seems like a slightly better idea just because he's providing a huge broadside to me. I had reloaded AP in hopes that the Fuso would turn a little bit more broadside, a little bit quicker. Unfortunately, he doesn't. So I put the last half of my shells out there. That might be inadvisable considering just the range difference. But we're trying our best to keep this angle. We don't have the ability to recover any more hit points. Unfortunately, every time I get hit, they're getting just a little bit of the soft part of my boat every time, so we don't manage to hold on to that one. We finish out the game with 143,249. Not too bad. Now, my team does go on to eventually sink that Fuso, and after a lot of effort, you can see the last part of it here, we do manage to finish off the Pensacola as well. So overall, California, what do I think of it? You know, it's a ship you can earn for free in the Bureau. Overall, it's a really fun ship if you do like this play style. I understand with American battleships being as immobile as they are that it doesn't appeal to everybody, but you know, the price is right. I would say by and large, if you can get this ship, there's not a whole lot that you'd really need the Arizona for. It is a little bit different in terms of its overall play style with more accurate guns A little bit more going on in the secondary department, but again, secondary's not going to help you right now. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this little review. Thank you everybody for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.